A wise man told me we are never given a dream without being given the power to make it true. You'll have to work for it, though. I'm Ron Schneider. Back in the 60s, I grew up around California theme parks, dreaming that someday I could make my living with that same kind of magic. In 1971, I got my first performing job at Magic Mountain. The 40 years that followed were one wild ride. And these are the stories of others who had that same dream and made it come true. Welcome to Wild Rides. I'm Ron Schneider. Every guest on this show has one thing in common. At some point, one way or another, they dreamed of living a life filled with magic. Some people wanted to work in a theme park, some people wanted to work on the stage, and some people just plain wanted to run away with the circus, like my guest today. This is the amazing Frank Lynch. He's done all that and more. Welcome, Frank.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
My pleasure. You were born in Long Island, New York?
Yes.
And as a kid, you dreamed of running away with the circus. What got you hooked?
I think, God bless her, my mom's 91 years old, and she still tells people, when Frank was little, all he cared about was when was the circus coming? When was the circus coming? Really? She still says, why didn't I take him to a museum and show him what an artist could do, or take him to a hospital and show him what doctors could do? But no, all I cared about was when was the next circus coming. And my first recollections in life are of Ringling Brothers Circus in Madison Square Garden in New York City, taking the train in and going up and seeing back then the sideshow and the menagerie, and then going up another floor into the old Madison Square Garden and seeing the actual big show. Now, I was probably 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah, with me it was the LA Sports Arena.
There you go.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. At what age did you realize that you could do that? That's something that you actually wanted to do in your life?
Well, in our little town out in West Hampton Beach on Long Island, there was a circus that came every year, a tented circus. And when I was 12, as soon as I heard it was coming, I would go out to the lot, and they would hire me to help put up the canvas tent. And they were canvas tents back then. And so at 12, I was a canvas boy for the Royal Wild West Circus. And for 40 or 50 years, I used to tell people I was with this Royal Wild West Circus. And there were cowboys and Indians, and well, as it turns out, 50 years later, as I do my history, circus history, that circus came out of New Jersey, and there wasn't a real cowboy or Indian. None of them had ever gone west of the Mississippi in their lives. They were all just circus entertainers playing the parts. But that I knew then that there's something magical about, as you know, the most addictive thing there is, and that's applause.
Yeah.
And I was hooked even then.
Yeah, the wonderful story about Dustin Hoffman was doing the film Marathon Man with Laurence Olivier, and they were having dinner after the shoot, and Dustin Hoffman said, why do we do this? What is the purpose of this? And Olivier stood up, leaned over across the table and said, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. Same thing. Same thing.
Yep.
So what brought you to Florida?
I came to Florida to go to college. And
At Ringling?
No, just to go to I had graduated high school and I went to Syracuse University for a semester and found out what winter was like. And I said, I have to go someplace warm. I probably need a Catholic college to keep me in line, and preferably an all-men's school, and I'll stay on the straight and narrow. And of course, the year that I came down to go to Biscayne College, they started to admit women and became a full-blown crazy college like all the other ones. But it was a great experience, and at the same time, got hired as the backstage manager with no experience to run a 17,000-seat rock concert arena. So I did that full-time while I was in college.
For somebody that your age, that must have been quite a thrill.
It was, I think when I started, I had only been to maybe 2 concerts in my whole life, and the third concert I ever went to was ZZ Top's Worldwide Texas Tour, and I was in charge of it. So that was pretty eye-opening. I learned in a hurry.
Yeah.
Okay, hit me with a couple of great stories about working backstage at that theater.
The one that I always remember was the owner called me in, and I thought, it'd be like going to the principal's office. I did something bad.
Right.
And he calls me in, and he said, I have a question for you. And I thought, oh, God, what did I do wrong? And he said, we're doing a show, and I want to know if you want to work it or if you want to go to it. And I thought, well, that was an odd question to ask. I've worked all these shows. And I said, why? And he said, it's Elvis Presley. At the time, Elvis Presley was not big among 21-year-old people. He was an oldies act as far as
Right.
But I was, that thing about applause and that thing about how he could walk on stage and immediately there was a response. That was what was in me. And so I was a huge Elvis fan. So I said, no, I got to work that show. And as it turned out, that was in February '77, and he passed away in August. So it was one of the last, got to work with him on one of his last shows.
Oh.
That was special. And then years later, when I worked for Michael Jackson, then there became a thing, well, this is the only guy that worked for Elvis and his son-in-law, Michael Jackson. So another one of my minuscule claim to fame.
Did Michael know that when you met him?
I don't even think that we discussed it, because he had not married Lisa Marie yet at that point.
Yeah. I got to meet Michael Jackson.
At Disney, I'm sure.
At Epcot Center.
Yeah.
I was doing the Dream Finder. I was upstairs in my dressing room. And I got a phone call saying, Michael Jackson's downstairs. He wants to meet the Dream Finder. And okay. So I slapped on the dragon and walked downstairs, and the whole picture-taking area had been roped off. The crowds were all down in front of the pavilion. And there's Michael Jackson walking around, sunglasses. And I went over and I said, the night before, the music video for Thriller had debuted on MTV. And I said to him, we saw your video last night. I thought it was wonderful. And he said, really? And he took off his sunglasses, and my hand to God, there was a yellow patch and a green patch and a red patch. He was all the colors of the rainbow. And he asked me, he said, very seriously, he said, didn't you think it was too dark? I said, no, John Landis wanted your eyes to pop out. And he said, oh, okay. And I found out later that he was coming back to our dressing room and using that as a break area to get away from the crowds whenever he was at Epcot. So yeah, those moments are just wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
I always thought it'd be funny if you could recreate the entire life of Elvis Presley. If you got everybody together who just brushed by him to sit in a coliseum in the right order, and then you pass the microphone along, everybody going, so he came out of the bathroom, and then he went past me over to the staircase, and the other guy picks the thing up and says, oh, he came up the stairs.
Well,
and you could tell the entire story of his life.
Yeah, he was the first person that I knew, and there's a few people like that. I'm sure you have seen some. When he came on stage, if you were in the last seat in the last row and he looked up, you thought he was looking at you. And that was the magic. That was the thing that always got me hooked about any of these people, whether it was entertainers. The great clown Bello Knock does that when he's in a sold out arena. He looks up and you think, hey, he's looking at, he's talking to me, and that was what always intrigued me about the entertainment side of this all.
That's what Jolson had.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it wasn't about his singing voice, it was the emotion that he put into everything.
Absolutely.
And Elvis is the same way.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, you've dealt with all these famous people and worked backstage and done it, obviously did it quite successfully for many years. What qualities do you find came in handy that made you suitable for this thing, and what things did you learn about how to go about your work?
For the most part, to take it back a little bit, when I was a teenager, I worked at a hotel where a lot of stars stayed. It was by a theater in the Round, back when there were theaters in the Round. Yeah. And I remember going upstairs, it was with Don Rickles, as a matter of fact. I was going upstairs to deliver something to it, and the maid was there that cleaned the rooms. And I said to her, and I was maybe 17 at the time, very impressionable, and I said, you're so lucky, you get to clean Don Rickles' room. And she's an 80-year-old lady. She puts her arm around me and she says, "Son, doesn't matter who it is, you still have to clean up their bathrooms." And what she meant was, everybody puts on their pants the same way, that she didn't treat them any different than anybody else. And that stayed with me. And, through time and doing a lot of shows, I just found treating them normally, in most cases, got you a lot further than, "Oh, sir, what can," kowtowing down to them. And it worked for a lot. It still does, because there are people that, they come up to me, "Hey, Frank, remember when we did this?" Or I'll go to a concert and say, "Could you tell so-and-so that I'm here? I just want to say hello." "Oh, come on, come on by." And I think it came from treating them on an equal level, not, of course, there are certain, exceptions to that where people want to be treated different. But for the most part, I think that was one of my keys, and why some people would say, "Oh," or they would call me and say, "Can you do this tour?" That was a compliment to me for sure. Kenny Rogers, for instance, they would call when they were "Can you go on tour? Can you do this? Can you do that?" And it was just because, for whatever reason, we got along as you and I do, just sitting here talking.
Yeah, you're a real person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you come to the Stars Hall of Fame came next?
Yeah. Yep, I was working full-time at the convention center as backstage manager, and there were some openings in the entertainment department at Stars Hall of Fame, and so I was like, well, I can do that part-time. And so I started over there part-time, and then there was an opening in the entertainment department with 20th Century Fox, who did the Screen Test Theater show there.
Was that the MASH show?
Yes, MASH was one of them, absolutely.
I remember it.
That's probably our most famous show that we did. And I took that full-time and ran that the length of the show until 20th Century Fox left. And when they left, then they offered me operations manager for the world's largest wax museum. And so then I took that over and still had fun with it. I would go out and do tours and stuff that I wasn't necessarily needed to do, but it gave me that interaction with the public that I liked.
Look at me, look at me, look at me.
Yeah, exactly.
I have been negligent. I have not plugged your book.
Oh.
Because the stories that we've been telling here, they're all in this book called Backstage Passes, which you can find on Amazon and just about any place. We just touched on a few of these stories, but this is it's an amazing journal of the people you've met and situations you've gotten yourself mixed up in.
Yes.
And so I wanted to make sure I got that in before.
Well,
we
thank
got
you.
too
I
far
appreciate
along.
that.
Well, it was my pleasure.
It's a fun read. I think
Yeah.
everybody has fun.
Yeah. What's it like running a wax museum?
It was interesting. The things you don't think about that are can be a problem. At night when we would close and turn on the security, we had a couple other outbuildings where the offices were and stuff. Well, obviously every window had to be completely sealed. And so if you missed one and you turned the alarm on, it would ring the police. But the police hated to come there because when they went inside, they didn't know anybody who was real and who wasn't.
Oh my.
And they were really, they would have to come in with guns drawn because they would never, they hated that call.
Oh.
That's one thing I remember. And then some of the other managers were afraid of the House of Horrors. So,
really?
So of course at night when you had to close the building, you had to do a walkthrough to make sure there were no tourists, dawdling around inside. But there were those that would walk past it because they didn't want to go in past Frankenstein and Dracula and stuff because they were that realistic. I always thought that was funny. It didn't bother me, but
that's amazing. You did an Elvis Presley museum. You did a rock and roll museum. Were these or both in Orlando?
Both in Orlando, both on International Drive.
And then came Church Street Station. Fondly remembered, much missed. How'd you wind up there?
I had seen an ad in a now defunct newspaper called Circus Report that there was an organ grinding act for sale. and
With monkey.
with monkeys,
Okay.
with live monkeys, and I had monkeys as a child. When everybody else wanted a dog or a cat, I wanted a monkey. And so, and again, look at me, I have a monkey. And so I went, met this guy at a hotel on OBT. He drove there to sell me these monkeys, and they were in very bad shape. And so I, of course, bought them, took them home and nursed them back, and then proposed to Church Street to become a Church Street organ grinder. And they loved the idea.
I'll bet.
And we were there a couple years, and it was great fun, and it was the Barnum in me. My oldest daughter was about 4 years old, and the gimmick was people hand the monkey a quarter,
Right.
and the monkey would shake their hand. If you handed the monkey $1, she would bring it to me. I would hand her a photo of her that said, "Good luck from your friend BB the monkey," and she would take it and hand it, was trained to take it to the person that she took the $1 from.
Smart monkey.
So yes, she was a very smart monkey. So what I would do is, there'd be a big crowd around me at Church Street. They were drawing huge crowds at that time.
Yeah.
And all the kids and adults would have quarters out. My daughter, who was 3 years old, would walk up with a $1 bill. BB would run over, since BB lived with her and knew her, start hugging her, kissing her, take the $1, give her the photo. Every kid in that group handed the quarter back to their parents and took a $1 bill and would make the rounds. My daughter would go back to my wife. 5 minutes later, she'd come back, and we'd do it over and over and over. And
a gig worthy of Barnum.
that was the Barnum in me.
That was.
There's one there that is a special to me. Second year we were there, a guy comes running towards me, a younger guy, and I, a little worried what, people come up, try to grab the animal and stuff. He's running towards me. I'm like, and he's like, you're here. And I go, excuse me? And he goes, you're here. Are you going to be here for 10 minutes? I said, yes. And I still didn't know. He said, listen, we were here last year. We brought my 6-year-old daughter to Disney, and we came here and she met BB the monkey. We have 5 pictures of BB on our refrigerator to this day. He said, we told her we were coming back. She said, I don't care about going to Disney. I need to be with BB. So that's one of my tenets, is you never know who you're going to affect in any part of this, any of what we do, where we interact with people. I didn't know that first year that we had made that impression on a child, that when her parents said, we're going to take you back to Disney, she said, and they were from New York, I think. She said, I don't care as long as we see BB the monkey. So that's one of my favorites from that time.
You finally wound up at Walt Disney World?
I did.
And then went on to the Great American Family Circus.
Right.
Which was located?
Winter quarters is in Davenport, Florida. Traditional one-ring circus, one elephant. Put the tent up, stay a day or two, take the tent down, do it in the next town.
Oh, nice.
And that was what I was always meant to do.
That must have been very satisfying to
It was. And
finally be the guy.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And, to have people, same thing, people come back here. I got my picture with you last year. Can we please take a picture? It's like.
One final question. I'd like you to.
Sure.
If you have any advice for people who are young Frank Lynches, who, they have this dream, and something you can say to them that is going to help encourage them, or give them a piece of wisdom that might see them improve, be better.
Well, it sounds cliché, but you can live your dream. And as we spoke about earlier, there were times when I was down and out, where I was to my last penny. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? And while I'm sitting there thinking about it, the phone would ring and say, for instance, that when I did the commercials as Ben Franklin for the Florida Lottery, at that point, I didn't know what I was going to do the next day to eat. And they're like, and then I get a call like that, where they're going to run, 3,000 commercials over the next 6 weeks. And so if you believe in your dream and you realize that if what you do can be interpreted, there's going to be people who love it, people who don't think one way or the other, and people who hate it. And you can't be thin-skinned about it. You go for it. Hey, there were times I took jobs I didn't like, part-time just to make it through. But it all was going back to where I wanted to be in the end. And at 50 years old, run away with the circus like a little kid again.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Frank. This has just been wonderful.
Oh, you're welcome.
I appreciate it.
It's
so
so
much.
good to see you.
And once again, don't forget the book is called Backstage Passes. And my guest has been Frank Lynch. Thank you again, Frank. This has been
You are so
wonderful.
welcome.
And I'm Ron Schneider. And follow your bliss. It's a wild ride.